All right, let's go ahead and start and say a prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Saint Faustina. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. So take a few notes, and then if you do the lab, you can do the lab after we finish the notes. Won't be very many things to do today for the notes. Okay. So the brain and the nervous system has a lot of protection because if it gets damaged, it can lead to death or severe problems in the body. So there are many layers of protection for both the brain and the spinal cord because they're so important to the body. The meninges is one of the many layers of protection that the brain and spinal cord have. So below the skull, you have skin, you have bone, and below the bone you have meninges, which is another layer of protection for the brain. And there's 3 layers to the meninges. You don't find meninges in the peripheral nervous system. It's only found in the central nervous system. It's only found in this brain and the spinal cord. But out further away from that, you don't have as much protection of your nerves. So those are more easily damaged than the ones near spinal cord and the brain. You have 3 layers of the meninges: the dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pia mater. So these are all Latin words. For those who know Latin, do you know what this one means, a dura mater? So mother would be mater, then what would dura mean? Like anything like durable, like what does durable mean? Tough. Yeah. So that's what that means. And so because it's the thickest layer of them, it's a tough layer. Then the other one, arachnoid? Spider. And then pia? Not bread. So that'd be a different language. But for Latin, what would pia mean? No.
The Latin people at,
yeah, guys, I am carrying you so bad right now. Remember.
You don't remember?
Yeah. I thought arachnoid was spider.
It is spider.
That's what he said.
Like spider.
Pia. Pia means delicate.
Yeah.
Or sweet. It can mean sweet or delicate. So now why would we call these? It's kind of strange that you have mater in this. Do you have any ideas why they call it that? That's right. Yeah, they protect and nourish the brain, just like a mother does for the children. So that's why it's called mater. It's kind of a strange word, but that's why they name it that. So arachnoid, because there is a web-like substance in this one. So all the white web, that's the arachnoid. And so that's why they call it. And then pia, because it's the thinnest and most delicate layer. Did you get those down? So next week we'll be looking at a brain. It won't be a human brain, though. It'll be a sheep brain. But you'll get to see all the different parts. And it's very, very similar to a human brain. Do what? You're going to dissect it. Yeah.
What are you dissecting? Brain?
Wait, what?
Yeah, a brain.
Dang.
Yeah.
Like we each have our own brain?
I think it's 2 per person. I mean, they're kind of expensive, so it'd be too much to.
One brain from one?
Oh yeah. 2 per person.
Wait, haha.
Okay, if you eat them, you're gonna get mad cow disease.
I thought
have you
never heard of that?
Never heard of mad cow disease? Well, I mean, it's called mad cow, but it's any kind of encephalitis that would be it could go crazy and kill you. I mean, cannibals, have you ever heard that before? That if they eat the brain of either a human or other animal, it's very serious. It can cause a lot of different diseases.
Wait, I thought you could eat goat brain tacos.
Goat brain tacos? That's a really bad idea.
No, that's,
Yeah.
You're eating.
I've never heard of
Yeah.
Oh, no, they do eat brain.
Yeah, not a good idea.
They do eat.
That's pretty dangerous. Yeah, not recommended. It is risky.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
Basically, mad cow disease or Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease for humans, it's a prion. It's this protein that you ingest from other brains, and it goes into your brain. And it's a domino effect where it makes all the proteins in your brain misfold, and it makes your brain just turn into Swiss cheese. It just disintegrates. It collapses and falls apart really fast. And they can't do anything for you if you have it. It's always fatal. There's no treatment for it.
When are we gonna dissect that?
Next week.
Next week?
So why is that? Like,
Why?
why does it make your brain disintegrate?
Because basically it's this protein that has misfolded that you're ingesting. And it's like a domino effect. Once that one protein hits other proteins, it makes them all degrade. And they all fall apart one after another. And they just all collapse. And your brain just falls apart at that point. All right, so the first layer right here, so below this, the bone, this right here, the dura mater, you see two parts to it. So it's the tough layer, it's the outermost layer around the brain and spinal cord. It's composed of tough white fibrous connective tissue. I guess they're putting pictures up over there. Like the each senior class. I think that's what they're doing. That's kind of what it sounds like to me anyway. I don't know. So this layer contains a lot of blood vessels and nerves.
We can't do it tomorrow.
Come in.
Miss, we have to go leave the scissors.
Scissors by the skull.
Oh, yeah, we're doing it tomorrow.
When are we?
Okay, the next layer below the dura mater, the arachnoid mater, you can see it right here. So the part that looks like the web. So it's a pretty thin membrane too, but its main purpose is to hold fluid. There's no blood vessels. So there is a fluid called cerebrospinal fluid that circulates through that area. Yeah.
Hey, you wouldn't happen to know when the first lunch is it?
The first lunch it'd be an hour before your lunch, and so it'd be during the fifth period.
Okay.
So it'd be from 11:27 to 12:17. Well, oh, you mean the one that's even before that one? Oh, yeah, that's right. There is one that comes before that. That's right. It's like, yeah, what time is that one? I don't think it starts at 10:30, does it? I think it's like 11, right? I think it's like a 30-minute lunch. I can check really fast because I don't think it's at 10:30. But I'll see. I forgot about that when they changed it this year because of COVID, I think.
Well, I think they've had that for a while.
Have they?
We haven't really. They usually just put it second grade and under. Yeah. Like, we never have it.
So the first layer, the dura mater, that's for protection. It's tough. It also has blood vessels for nourishment. The next layer, the arachnoid mater, its main job is to circulate fluid and create fluid. So it creates CSF or cerebrospinal fluid, which then circulates through the brain and spinal cord. And this is like blood plasma. It's very similar to that. So it's mostly water along with some salt and protein. Now, if you were to see it, it would look just like water to you. Unless you have an infection, but if it's normal, it's going to just look like clear water. You can see right here in the spinal cord too. So this right here. So it circulates through both the brain and spinal cord. You have the three layers, the dura mater, arachnoid mater, pia mater, throughout the spinal cord as well. And so you have fluid going throughout the spinal cord, just like in the brain. And the last layer, the pia mater, is very thin. So that's what the name tells you. It's delicate. Okay. That's kind of
all that stuff together is pretty strong.
Yeah, it is. So that's, yeah, you need a lot of protection for your brain, both, outside with your skull, but also inside. If you get concussion, for example, that's when your brain hits your skull really hard. And so the idea is to protect your brain from any kind of impact.
Wait, is your brain kind of like floating around?
It is floating around. Yeah, so there's a fluid, like we're talking about right here. This fluid surrounds your brain. And this is outside, this fluid right here is outside your brain. And so your brain is suspended in this fluid. It's never touching your skull normally, unless you have an impact, so if you hit your head hard, it will hit your skull. But if you're resting, it's not touching your skull. It's floating around in this fluid.
So weird.
Yeah. But a concussion would be when it hits your skull hard and it bruises it or damages it.
Damages the brain.
Yeah, it makes it, concussion is brain damage. When you have a concussion, you damage your brain. So you can have bleeding, you can have swelling of the brain, but it's always brain damage.
And so you just wait for it, like, does it heal like your skin?
It depends on the kind of injury you have. Some concussions you never heal from. I know people who just have never healed from concussions. They just are not the same as they used to be before the concussion. It's permanent brain damage. And they get migraine all the time. They have depression, or they just can't think clearly. They can't focus. It just depends on the injury and where it's at. You can have amnesia. So it just depends on where you have injured your brain.
Yeah. What should you do like right after you get a concussion?
Well, the best thing to do would be go to the doctor right away, just to get checked out. But after that, the doctor can tell you what you should do in that situation. But short term, get ice. Reducing inflammation is very important. Laying down, so you can reduce the pressure in your brain is important. So laying down and getting ice would help with that. You can fall asleep, and a lot of people think you shouldn't fall asleep.
Where do they go?
By the skull.
Where?
Just that's fine. Yeah.
Great.
So you can fall asleep after concussion. That's okay. It's not a problem because as long as people should check for your pulse and things like that. But it's yeah, but that's not going to happen. Certainly you can have a brain damage where you do injure the part of the brain, or you do into a coma.
Yeah.
But that would generally be right away if that were to happen.
Oh, okay.
Usually, if you're conscious, it's not going to happen.
So they can go to sleep, but it's best to lie down.
And yeah, you should rest and get ice.
Yeah. Do you build up pressure in your brain if you're like lying on your stomach, but you have your head up?
Lying on your stomach with your head up. I don't know how that would build pressure in your brain.
Well, I'm just wondering, because I know that like sometimes when I was like lying on the ground and I have my head up, like my head feels like foggy.
It feels like what?
Foggy or something.
Foggy. Well, I think actually you might be cutting off circulation to your head in that situation. I think because you have, the main arteries, your carotid artery is like right here. And you might be cutting off circulation to your brain if you have at a really acute angle. That might be what's happening. But you shouldn't be building up pressure that way. Now, if you're upside down, yeah, you're building up pressure in your brain upside down. But that way, I don't see how you would. So the pia mater, the very bottom one next to the brain, that's a really gross picture, sorry, but this is one the book has.
It literally looks like it's wrong.
Yeah, it's really gross. That nourishes the brain too. So the bottom layer next to the brain, which you can see right here, the pia mater is right above that one. And that has blood vessels to bring nutrients and oxygen to the brain cells. The very top layer, the dura mater, you can see it right here. It's a white, tough tissue, arachnoid. You can see it down here, the fuzzy white. Ventricles are spaces. So the brain has fluid outside, but also has fluid inside. And so there's circulating areas throughout the brain, inside and outside. So there's major openings within the brain called ventricles. These are cavities, there's like caves that fill up with fluid. They create this fluid and they circulate it through the brain. So cerebrospinal fluid is in ventricles and it's created in the ventricles, and then it moves through the brain and spinal cord. And there's a few reasons why you have this circulating through the brain. The brain is constantly needing to go undergo repair. So sleep is so important for the brain because when you sleep, your brain can be cleaned. The fluid has to flush out toxins, dead cells, bacteria that have accumulated throughout the day. Your brain also makes sense of what happened throughout the day. You have to sort your memories. So sleep is important for memory retention too, because if you don't sleep, you can't really create memories very well. You don't have a good memory without sleep because that's when your brain consolidates the events of the day, decides what's important and stores that in long-term memory, and then deletes the things that are not important to it. But if you don't sleep, you don't undergo that. And so pulling all-nighters before tests are not good ideas because you can't consolidate your memories. You have worse time retaining information if you don't have that sleep. Because your brain, that's how your brain learns. And that's how your brain will flush out toxins, will flush out things that, cause it to slow down. And so as you accumulate toxins and chemicals, it's going to make you drowsier. It's going to make your brain function less efficiently. And it just builds up if you don't sleep until eventually you have to sleep. Your brain will make you sleep if you don't sleep. After 10 days, if you don't sleep, you're going to die. Your brain just forces you to go to sleep because you need that time to basically regenerate and clean anything that's dirty in the brain. So cerebrospinal fluid is similar to blood plasma. It looks very similar to that. It looks like water. It comes from blood plasma. It's basically just water with protein and salt. So normally it will look clear, but if you have an infection, it will look cloudy. It might look yellow or white and not clear. And that would be a sign of a bacterial infection or a viral infection. If you see cloudiness, that could be bacteria or it could be white blood cells dying. So the part that forms cerebrospinal fluid is right here in the center of your brain, the choroid plexus. And then it just sends out fluid from that area to the ventricles and then circulates throughout. You can see the direction of blood flow. And you can see the arrows where they point. And they move around and they go down the spinal cord and up. So the choroid plexus is a capillary in the brain. Basically, this is capillaries are very, very small blood cells, and they connect to the blood vessels. So these are the smallest blood vessels that connect to larger blood vessels. And so from the blood system, you have blood plasma come out, which forms this fluid. So one purpose of this fluid, again, we talked about this before, it cushions the brain. And so it suspends itself within this fluid so it doesn't hit the sides of your skull. And it reduces pressure to your brain. So it's a good way to prevent, if you do have any impact, it prevents the brain from getting hurt worse than it would be without that cushioning. It also protects the spinal cord too, to a lesser extent. But you have bone encasing your spinal cord. And so if that were to hit against the bone, that could also damage it. And you have several ventricles in your brain. There's 4 of them. I don't think you can see all of them in here.
Okay,
yes.
This is a really weird question, but like if you're in a state of severe dehydration, would your body like absorb, like if they're really like you've absorbed all the rest of the water in your body, would your brain like absorb that liquidy cushion?
Part of it, and so that's one reason why you might have a headache with dehydration. Because you're feeling a difference in your fluid pressure in your brain too. That's one possibility.
Really?
Yeah.
So it doesn't even have to be that bad.
Yeah, I mean, basically what happens if you're dehydrated, you're gonna have lower blood pressure, which will then, it can cause all kinds of problems. But you're going with lower blood pressure, you can have pretty bad headaches.
Yeah.
The way your blood vessels change their shape is gonna affect how you feel. And so you are going to have reduced blood volume, reduced blood pressure with dehydration, which if it's severe enough can then go on and infect your cerebrospinal fluid and other parts. So yeah, definitely, you're going to lose fluid if you're dehydrated. Your body takes it in
Yeah.
if it needs to.
So if you have a lot of blood pressure, do you get more dehydrated easily?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because your blood carries a lot of fluid. And so if you're dehydrated, yeah, one side of that would be low blood pressure. The fluid forms and drains at a constant rate though. So normally it's supposed to be at a constant volume and pressure, 150 milliliters of total fluid throughout the brain. When that changes, you are going to feel severe pain. You're going to, if it's too much or too little, you're going to feel a change in that pressure. You're going to really feel like acutely. Your brain is very sensitive to that kind of change in pressure.
So I was watching a video about a round going into your head, and it didn't say that you died from the brain. You died from like the pressure and the skull being completely shattered. But you would eventually die from the brain if nothing else had happened. But is that true?
It depends when you hit yourself. That it really just depends on location, because you can definitely have a brain injury that's not fatal. So it just depends on location. Like it's just your frontal lobe, for example, you can survive that, but you wouldn't have as many memories. You might lose a lot of memories, or you might forget how to write or talk. It's just like having a stroke. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. When people have strokes, they might have different things that happen after they have the stroke. They might not be able to walk. They might forget who they are. It just depends on the location of the brain injury. So yeah, lots of times there have been many cases of people who have had either gunshot wounds to the head or other kinds of brain injury, and they do survive because the brain that is damaged, it was not vital for life. The part that is really vital for life though is the back part right here. That controls your breathing, your heart rate. So if that's damaged, it's pretty much instant death. But the front part is for logic and reasoning. So that part, you could have some of that damaged and you can still survive. So it just depends on the location. But yes, it is very possible to survive a brain injury. Just depends on where it's at. And yes, the pressure building up would cause further brain damage, which could then cause death if it's not treated. So yeah, lots of times it is more of what's happening is you either have lost blood so much that the brain cells die from the blood loss, or you can have pressure build up to the point where the blood cells and the brain cells die. So either of those can happen, but yes, but usually it depends on where you're shot. But if it's on the outside right here, you're gonna probably survive that.
Yeah, it also said that like smaller rounds, 20%, 25% of the time they'll hit and then they'll like go up the head and on the outer space of the brain and don't even hit the brain because they don't have enough velocity to penetrate it.
And then you'd probably survive that if you don't have enough blood loss. But if you hit the center part right here, that's going to be deadly. That contains your hypothalamus, your thalamus, your pituitary gland. You need those to survive. So if it hits right here or back here, that's going to be instant death.
Where are your eyes located on that?
Your eyes, it's hard to show right here. I don't know if I can really show the picture, but just it's like right below, basically. I mean, I don't know those organs, but you can see the eye right here.
So it's perfectly level with that middle part?
It's like, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But lots of times you can have a gunshot wound to the eye, and that lots of times would not be deadly because it would just start to slow down enough to the point where it wouldn't cause a lot of damage to your brain. It caused some damage, but yeah, frontal lobe damage, again, well, it's going to affect your personality. You might have a different personality after that's damaged. It'll affect your memory, your reasoning, but it's not always deadly. Usually it's not deadly. Okay, so if you detect a change in the fluid in your brain, that can indicate meningitis. So meningitis means inflammation of the meninges. If you have, so itis at the end means inflammation of a certain part of the body. So meningitis would be the meninges are inflamed. That can be for different reasons. It could be bacterial infection, viral infection. It could be autoimmune problems where the body's attacking the meninges for some reason. Brain tumors are also could cause this to change fluid. Multiple sclerosis where the nerves are damaged. So one reason why headaches could indicate a problem with the cerebrospinal fluid. That's not usually the case, but headaches could be a sign of that. Okay, so for this one right here, so if they suspect things like meningitis or a brain tumor, then they will do a spinal tap, also called lumbar puncture. And so they have a very long needle that goes into your back between your vertebrae. And then they go into the subarachnoid space, which is the space that is between the arachnoid and pia mater. And they take out some of the cerebrospinal fluid. Look and analyze it. So you can see right here where it goes in between two vertebrae into this space right here, which is where the cerebrospinal fluid circulates through the spinal cord. And it goes in between L3 and L4 usually.
That's the lumbar part.
Yeah.
Is this like where you puncture the wrong spot, you could die? Or is that
You could. I mean, generally, somebody who's well trained isn't going to do that. They're going to make that's a huge mistake to make. But it certainly could be a possibility if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, where they could definitely injure your spine to the point where, yeah, you could be paralyzed or even die. But it's pretty low risk. I mean, usually they know what they're doing, so they're not going to make a big mistake like that. But they stick a needle in with this opening, and then fluid drains. And that's the cerebrospinal fluid that drains into a test tube. It's supposed to be clear. If it's cloudy, it indicates an infection usually. Usually you're seeing bacteria and white blood cells if it's cloudy. So meningitis would be one thing that they would look for in spinal tap. So meningitis can be bacterial, viral, fungal, parasitic. It just depends on, all kinds, but viral is the most common and least severe. Oh, sorry. So generally, the beginning signs of meningitis would be a stiff neck, numbness, tingly, maybe paralysis in certain parts of the body, flu-like symptoms, nausea. Light affects your eyes to the point where, bright light causes headaches. So there are many kinds of it. But again, the most common two kinds are bacterial and viral. Of the two, viral is the most common and least severe. Bacterial is a lot more severe. Bacterial can be deadly in many cases. Viral almost never is deadly. Viral usually clears up on its own. So usually on its own, about 7 days or so, viral meningitis will clear up. But bacterial meningitis needs antibiotics immediately, and that does not clear up on its own. And that can become deadly within even a day. You can deteriorate very quickly with bacterial meningitis. So the vaccines that they require are for bacterial meningitis. What, Patrick?
Oh, never mind.
So when you go to college, they require a vaccine for the bacterial meningitis, because that's the one that, it could be deadly very quickly without you even realizing it.
Wait, so you have to get the puncture thing in your back?
No, not lumbar puncture. No, just a vaccine. Yeah, just a shot. And so,
How effective is it?
very effective. Yeah. I mean, you still have a chance of getting it, but it's very, very much reduced if you have that vaccine.
But that vaccine has been tested a whole bunch.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, it's been around for a long time. Yeah. So some of the most common viruses that do cause meningitis would be the chickenpox virus, herpes virus. Those would be the two common viruses that can cause meningitis. There's also another kind of parasite, the amoeba in water, that can cause meningitis. That is pretty much always deadly if that gets into your brain. Warm pond, so still warm water, like in ponds and lakes.
But they won't be in like a lake that's like a cave.
Yeah, there's less. So if it's moving a lot, there's going to be less. Maybe like to stick to places that don't move too much, like on rocks, on near the bottom part of the like the soil in that area. That's where we're going to find them.
So like you can go swimming in the lake.
Yeah, I mean that's perfect as long as you don't snort the water. I mean, it has to go up your nose. So if you swallow it, it's not going to hurt you. I mean, it's not going to cause the amoeba to go into your brain. It has to go up through your nose to your brain.
And you have to like snort it up. You just can't go like up your nose.
Yeah, you gotta breathe it in. I mean, yes. I mean, it's not easy to do. Some people use nose plugs. I mean, I think for kids that might make sense, but for anybody who's not a little kid, you're not gonna have that happen to you. I mean, you have to really breathe it in through your nose up to your brain for it to cause a problem. It's very rare. I think it's like 30 cases in the past 15 years. So it's not that many cases. But it's really scary because every case is deadly. So once you have it, they can't really do anything for you. Encephalitis would be brain inflammation. You have meningitis, which is meninge inflammation. Encephalitis would be brain infection or brain inflammation.
Your brain swell.
Your brain can definitely swell. And that can be all kinds of different reasons. So it can be through infection. For babies, though, your brain can swell, and it's called hydrocephalus, where you just have too much brain fluid. You have too much CSF in the brain, and it builds up pressure. And because the baby's skull is not formed, they still have soft spots, they still have cartilage, and the skull is flexible, their head can swell up in size. And so sometimes you can see this in babies and toddlers where their head is very big from the buildup of brain fluid. Yeah. It depends. If the skull was already set, no. But as long as the soft spot is still there, then you remove the fluid, then it can. So it just depends on how long it's there for and when your bones have been set. Okay, so let's go to mass. So over the weekend, I won't give any homework. We'll finish up notes and we'll do the lab next week on Monday. Oh, and Antonio, they said 10:50 for lunch was the first one, 10:50.